Hello and welcome back to my channel. And if you're new here, welcome. If you have heard me tell Ouija board stories before, you know how I feel about them. And if you don't, well, maybe these stories will help you gain some insight. Enjoy. We went out of our way to get haunted by something that came through our Ouija board. After trying and failing to contact a spirit the first time, we cut the lights, lit some candles, and turned on an old radio to play nothing but white noise, while we tried to make contact with the other side. When a spirit finally responded, we learned that its name was Zozo. We began to try and move the planchette in circles, like you do when you're expecting an answer. Then all of a sudden, it stopped on the hello spot of the board and wouldn't move. We actually slid the entire board off the table trying to get it to move. It was being pushed down by something invisible, hard. The planchette continually alternated between saying hello and no. Then the radio emitted screeching sounds. A bunch of objects fell off the top of the refrigerator. The candles blew out. And a cat that lives at the house began walking with a limp the next day. Odd activity that we couldn't explain continued in that house for the next 2 weeks. A spirit named Deb proved that it existed by explaining that it knows where me and my friends smoke, possibly insinuating that it's watching us get our fix. Not freaked out enough by this information to stay inside, my friend Haley and I pressed Deb to prove she was real. I said, "How will we know you're real?" And she just said, "Trees." I was like, okay, screw that. Haley says, we have to do it. So we go outside to smoke. I'm looking into the forest, sweating balls in fear, thinking I'm going to see some demon face in the branches. Eventually we relax. But then Haley, mid-sentence, her face drops and goes white, and she said, "Get inside, now." I toss my cigarette and jump in the window. We close the blinds, and we're breathing really heavy. So I ask her, what happened? She said that behind me in the distance, there was a 100-foot tall tree. There was no wind. I remember this because I was watching my cigarette smoke go directly up. I was blowing perfect O's without them disappearing. She said the tree was completely still. Then suddenly, the entire tree, including the trunk, moved back and forth. Then went back to being perfectly still. After a while of freaking out, we sat back at the board. When we put our fingers on it, it said, "Did you see?" While stationed in Germany, myself and some fellow soldiers decided to light some candles and contact the dead. The first spirit we spoke with was a young woman who had perished while she and her boyfriend were driving home from a Grateful Dead concert, and now she was looking for him. After she went away, we actually spoke to the boyfriend, who asked if we could tell his girlfriend that he was sorry. Then we spoke to a ghost of an older woman, who said the reason the spirit of the young woman couldn't find her boyfriend was because he was in hell. While messing around with the Ouija board as a young man, my stepdad was visited by a demon who told him that his firstborn child would perish. Understandably, the next morning he tried to get rid of the board by throwing it away, then burning it, and finally burying it with a Bible on top for good measure. Years later, his wife miscarried their first child. While playing with a Ouija board with some friends from high school, my friends and I encountered a spirit named Niall, who said that he had been slain by his father. We tried to move on from this conversation, but the spirit continued to insist that he wanted answers, even going so far as to spell out, "Satisfy my requests." After that, we abandoned everything: the board, the house, and the street. After building a spirit board with my sister, we contacted a spirit named Roger, who perished of food poisoning and knew that our older sibling wanted to talk to us. Shortly afterward, our sister, who was upstairs vacuuming, called for us to help her with the household chores. We got so freaked out that we threw out the board, only for it to return the next day. Imagine a Ouija board that was so pent up with spooky energy that it didn't even have to be used to start screwing around with your life. That's what happened to me. When I took the board in from a friend who said that every time she tried to use it, the same spirit continued to show up. After taking the board to its new home, things began to move around in the middle of the night. Footsteps were heard, and the animals reacted to things that no one else could see. We tried to reach my friend's grandmother. We were contacted by the spirit of something that wore wooden clogs and had the touch of something not quite human. After being called, the spirit entered the room and touched everyone in the circle, causing them to hyperventilate. Suddenly, the girl sitting closest to the door started hyperventilating, and tears filled her eyes. We were all frozen in fear at this point. It's really hard to get a feeling of how fast time went, but not long after it started, it stops and starts with the person on her left doing the same thing. I don't think I really understood at the time that I was next in line, but it ended with the person next to me. I suddenly felt something touch my shoulders. It wasn't completely like the physical touch of a human, but it definitely was something that put weight on my shoulders. I, of course, freeze and start hyperventilating at the shock of something unknown touching me. When this had gone halfway through the circle, it jumped straight at my friend, who was the granddaughter, who starts with the same hyperventilating and breaks down crying. We were playing with the Ouija board late at night. We asked for a simple sign so we could know we were actually communicating with the spirit realm and not just absent-mindedly moving the planchette around. That's when the local flood alarm sounded 3 times. However, there was no rain that night. This is a Ouija story about my grandmother. She decided to pass some time with her lady friends and my grandpa one spooky evening. After reaching a spirit and asking the basics, they cut to the chase and asked how the ghost passed. The ghost said it would tell them, but not until the boy left the room. After Grandpa left, the spirit began to relay the story of its demise. But when Grandpa returned to fetch his wallet, the spirit cut its chilling tale short. While playing with a Ouija board with my cousin Danny in a camper outside of our house, I kept receiving the same message again and again. The letters H and A, followed by, "You are trapped." When we decided to leave the camper, we discovered that the door handle had been broken off. We were trapped. Eventually we got out, but that was the last time either of us messed with a Ouija board. New Year's Eve 1991. Our siblings contacted a spirit named Eugene. We asked, "Why are you contacting us, Eugene?" We received the answer, "Afraid." That seemed a bit more serious. So we asked, "Why are you afraid, Eugene?" It replied, "Music, music," over and over. Nonsense. Then we got a series of numbers. My brother had the bright idea to turn on the radio to the station indicated by the numbers. To our surprise, there really was a station there. The song "Don't Leave Me Stranded" by Heart was playing. The board immediately started saying, "Heart, heart, heart." I thought my brother was just playing off of what he was hearing and was screwing with me. Then it started saying, "Don't go. Don't leave me. Don't go. Church. Church. Afraid. Don't go." Over and over and over. We assured it we weren't going to go, but it dwindled into nonsense after a while. It was getting really late, and we decided to go to bed. The next day, while everyone was eating breakfast, the family's father received a phone call letting him know that his uncle Eugene had a heart attack the previous night and died multiple times on the table, only to be revived very early that morning. He had been terrified of losing his life because he hadn't attended church in decades. It's a well-known fact that the Queen Mary, a historic cruise ship permanently docked in Long Beach, California, is one of the most haunted sites on the planet. When a group of friends decided to experiment on the ship, they spoke with a spirit who said that its name was Zach, and who may have tried to physically assault the team after they went to bed that night. Each member of the crew suffered night terrors, with one of them running through the Our Father prayer in a state of lucid dreaming. I have a couple of stories about my strange Ouija board that predicted major events in the lives of those who used it, but the most interesting thing about it is how the board consistently had 35 cents in the box. One time, one of my friends ended up taking the change for luck and kept it on them at all times. Months later, that change was able to help them make a phone call that got them out of a very sticky situation. I decided to use my Ouija board in the wilderness one afternoon. Myself and my family spoke to a spirit who may have been reaching out for help. After meeting something calling itself Patrick, my family had a good time joking around with the ghost until it told us that he'd been brutally assaulted and slain near where we were hanging out. After that, we shut the conversation down, returned home, and checked up on the story, which had been reported in the local news. The last thing you want to do is burn a spirit board. I decided to get spooky with my friends one day and printed out a Ouija board from the internet. And after we failed to get anything going with a ghost, we burned the board in the fireplace. That's when everything got creepy. A set of downstairs doors opened randomly. Then we heard continual banging from downstairs. The creepiest part of the entire story is that one piece of the board survived. Just the word, yes. After having some success speaking with spirits via a Ouija board in college, I may have accidentally attached to me 2 ghosts that followed me home after graduating school. The spookier of the beings was an old man who wore a hat and smoked a pipe, while sitting next to me as I slept, and shouted at me to wake up. The haunting became so bad that I had to get the house cleansed. If you're using a Ouija board and the spirits get tired of you and wish you a good day, definitely don't keep pestering the entity. While playing with a Ouija board in my teens, myself and some friends continually pestered a spirit after it told us goodbye multiple times. Finally, the spirit got so tired of us harassing it that it actually called us on the phone, spoke to one of our fathers, and said, "Don't mess with me." I accidentally invited a demon named Cause into my dreams. While I don't necessarily believe in spirits, the conversations I had with this entity on an abandoned basketball court have made me believe that something is out there. He said he was blonde, blue-eyed, and burned, all of which I thought was a weird description. And when I asked what he meant by burned, he said fire. So I asked him if he died in a fire. There was some hesitation. I thought I hit a nerve or something with the spirit. After a long pause, the response was yes. I then asked what year it was when this happened. 1816. Okay, so at this point, I just start talking to Cause like an old chum or something. I began to ask about his family life and things like that. And while I didn't believe it, I still had fun. I asked him if he could visit me because I thought he was an alright guy. Cause said, "Dreams." I said, "Sure, you can visit me in my dreams. That'd be alright." Cause did indeed come visit me in my dreams, and it wasn't pretty. When I and my cousin, we live in the same house, decided to dig up an antique Ouija board and play around with the spirit world, we got more than we bargained for. After goofing around with the spirit, we put the board away without dismissing the spirit, thus inviting it to creep us out constantly. Even when we were going to the bathroom, we destroyed the planchette, burned the board, and buried it. But the board reappeared on our doorstep. While using a Ouija board with some friends to communicate with a spirit from beyond the grave, we chatted with a young woman named Bridget, who claimed to have perished in a car accident. When the friends grilled her about the facts of her passing, make, model of the car, year of the event, etc., the spirit freely gave up her answers until the game ended. We looked up Bridget's info online and discovered that it was all true. And ever since then, we've felt like something is following us. Maybe my first mistake was getting cross-faded before invoking a demon through Ouija board. Or maybe it was not shutting down the conversation when we discovered we were talking to a demon. Either way, we kept chatting with this alleged demon until it said that it wanted to hurt everyone using the board. When we went home, we discovered all of our furniture was moved around and all the cabinets were open. Whether this was simply a prank or the work of a demon is yet to be determined. I don't think any investigation is necessary. When it comes to the spirit world, I will never understand how so many people claim to be skeptics, yet they are hell-bent on attempting to see some sort of evidence from what they call a toy they can buy at Target. Maybe they should start selling holy water. I recommend putting it in spray bottles. If you like this video, please hit that like button and consider subscribing so I can entertain you with all the insanity that I find on the internet. If you have a request or story to submit, please email me at duchessdark676@gmail.com. Thanks for watching. See you next time.